Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a blue-black control deck named Willbreaker, since surprise surprise it's a deck built around the card named Willbreaker, which is a 5 mana 2/3, which seems pretty bad, but the ability here is very important, since whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes the target of a spell or ability we control, we get to gain control of that creature for as long as we control a Willbreaker. So basically the idea is to play Willbreaker and then steal all the opponent's creatures and then attack with those creatures to win the game. So of course we need a lot of ways to target the opponent's creatures without actually killing them, so we get to steal them. So that's the idea behind the deck. Of course we only have 2 copies of Willbreaker, so we'll need a lot of card draw and card selection to try and find Willbreaker. But not every game will end up with a Willbreaker in play, so we also need some other win conditions. But that's the idea behind the deck, so let's get started here with our 2-drops, where we have a Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, which is a great card. Lets us loot for a bunch first, so we get to draw and discard, trying to look for the cards we're missing, and then he will transform into Jace Telepath Unbound, which can shrink creatures or flashback instants and sorceries from the graveyard, so a lot of card advantage there. Then we also have a few copies of Alchemist's Vial, which is a 2 mana artifact that cycles itself, so when we play it we get to draw a card, and then for 1 mana, tapping and sacrificing the Vial, target creature can't attack or block this turn, so this is a nice combo with Willbreaker, since for 1 mana we can steal a creature, but of course the Vial is also just fine by itself, since it cycles itself, digs a little deeper, and then we can also use it against aggressive decks to buy some time by not letting a creature attack, for example. We also have the full amount of telling time for some card selection here. We can look at the top 3 cards and then put one in hand and one on top and one on the bottom. So we can look for lands if we need those, or just try and dig for some action. Then we also have a copy of Disperse, which is one of the few ways in blue-black to deal with cards like Planeswalkers or enchantments. We can try and bounce it, buy some time, maybe counter it on the way down, since we do have some counter spells as well, and we can also flash it back with Jace, for example. Also 1 copy of Reave Soul for the early game, as a cheap removal spell that deals with creatures with power 3 or less, and also a card we can flash back with Jace or get back from the graveyard with one of the cards we'll get to in a bit. We also have the full amount of Jorubai Murk Lurker, which is a great card for 2 reasons. It stops aggro decks, since most of the time this will be a 2/4 for 3 mana, since we'll control a swamp, it gets +1/+1, and then for 1 and a black we can also give target creature lifelink until end of turn, so we can give the Murk Lurker itself lifelink to gain us some life against aggressive decks, but this is also great with Willbreaker, since it doesn't specify which creatures you can target, so you can also target the opponent's creatures with this ability. So then for 1 and a black we can steal a creature if we have Willbreaker in play, which is obviously pretty good. Then we also have 2 copies of Scatter to the Winds, which is a hard counter for 3 mana. We can also awaken it, but to be honest you're not gonna awaken it very often, and just having a 3 mana counter is actually pretty good in this game. So happy to have both copies of Scatter to the Winds, since it's also a way to protect our Willbreaker. Then we have the full amount of Read the Bones, which is the best way we have to look at the most amount of cards for the least amount of mana. So we get to scry 2 first and then draw 2 cards, but we do have to lose 2 life of course, but we get to offset that a little bit thanks to our Murk Lurkers. So Read the Bones can help us find the Willbreaker or the other cards that target creatures, for example. Speaking of creatures that can target, we have the full amount of Whirler Rogue, which is just a great creature by itself, since we get a 2/2 and 2 1/1 flyers for just 4 mana, which is already good. But then this ability is quite relevant in this deck, since by tapping 2 untapped artifacts we control, target creature can't be blocked this turn, so this is another free way of targeting the opponent's creatures once we have Willbreaker in play, since we can just tap our 2 Thopters and then steal an opponent's creature with the Willbreaker ability. And we can also just use this on our own creatures, of course, if we have a large creature that we want to make unblockable. Then we have the full amount of a Rising Miasma, which might seem a little weird, since it's a non-bow with the Whirler Rogue, but just being able to give all creatures -2/-2 buys us a lot of time against the aggressive decks, which can otherwise be a problem. And the difference between Rising Miasma and a card like Languish is of course that Willbreaker doesn't die to our own Rising Miasma, and we have some other valuable cards that are 4 toughness or 3 toughness that we don't really wanna lose to a Languish, for example, or Murk Lurkers can survive the -2/-2, but they won't survive a Languish, and most of the time Rising Miasma is gonna be good enough against the aggressive decks that you don't really need the -4/-4, so that's why we're going with the Rising Miasma here. Then we also have Desciple of the Ring, which is another sweet card. So for 5 mana we get a 3/4, which has a lot of sweet abilities here. So by paying 1 mana and exiling an instant or sorcery card from our graveyard, we get to do a number of things. One of those is countering a non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2, or the Desciple can get +1/+1, or we get to tap target creature, or we get to untap target creature. So this is another way to go with the Willbreaker, since we can tap or untap the opponent's creatures and then steal them. And of course we also get to protect our Willbreaker and the Desciple itself with the first ability here by countering non-creature spells like removal spells, for example. Then of course we have Willbreaker itself. Then we also have 1 copy of Possessed Skaab, which is a 5 mana 3/2 that when he enters a battlefield we get to return an instant, sorcery or creature from our graveyard to our hand. So this can get back or removal spells or counter spells, or perhaps even a Willbreaker that has died. So a lot of versatility there. Then we also have 1 copy of Unholy Hunger, just as a 5 mana unconditional removal spell. Instant speed, and we even get to gain 2 life if we have spell mastery. Then we also have Ob Nixilis, which is another removal spell and card advantage engine. If we can get him down and start drawing some cards at the cost of a life, which we can offset with the Murk Lurkers, and overall just a great card. Then we have 2 copies of Drowner of Hope, which is a 6 mana 5/5 Eldrazi that comes into play with 2 Eldrazi Scion tokens, and the ability here is relevant with Willbreaker, since we can sacrifice a Scion token to tap target creature, which of course is a way to target the opponent's creatures and steal them with the Willbreaker. And then we also have Sire of Stagnation, which is another big Eldrazi. This one not really a combo with the Willbreaker, but just a great card in a blue-black deck, since whenever an opponent plays a land we get to draw 2 cards, and that's just a great ability. And then finally 1 copy of Alhammarret High Arbiter, 7 mana for a 5/5 with flying, and then when he enters a battlefield the opponent has to reveal his hand and we get to choose a non-land card, and that player can't cast the card that we named. So this is a way to stop the Eldrazi decks, for example, from casting Ulamog, which otherwise can be a problem. And then our mana base: 10 islands, 8 swamps, 2 Sunken Hollow, 2 Drowned Catacomb, and then 4 Evolving Wilds, which goes nicely with a card like Telling Time, so we can shuffle our library if we don't like the card we put on top, and also helps us find the swamp, which is important for the Murk Lurker. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look here at our opener, which looks pretty good. We have Jace and Reave Soul for the early game, and hopefully we draw into some more lands, so our Scatter of the Winds and Rising Miasma come online. Alright, let's play our Jace and pass the turn. Up against red-white, so could be some sort of aggressive deck here. Could be red-white allies, as we see Castigator, so that's a good target for our Reave Soul. Could also wait and try and get multiple creatures with the Miasma, but if our opponent puts an enchantment on the Castigator, then we're in trouble. Could of course just keep up the Scatter to the Winds here, but I think just Reave Souling is fine. And pause the turn. We can activate Jace on the end step, since then we'll have more information about the opponent's board state. And having Reave Soul in the graveyard is also good, since we can maybe flash it back at some point. So opponent plays Firemantle Mage, and Jace we can, let's see, Miasma is gonna be great, Read the Bones I don't hate, even though it's gonna cost us some life. So it's between the Skaab and the Scatter here. I think we can ditch the Skaab, since it's a little expensive right now. Alright, another Miasma is not bad. So I think I'm gonna keep up the Scatter to the Winds here. So we'll have 3-4 cards in the graveyard, and then next turn we should be able to transform the Jace. So let's pause the turn, and of course we don't want our Jace to die to our own Rising Miasma. So pretty much countering any card that doesn't die to our Miasma here. So this one we can let resolve. So it triggers the rally. So we'll get hit for 2. Might as well see what we draw here. Alright, the Disciple. I think we can also discard, since we probably won't need it against the creature deck. So we'll take 2. And does our opponent have a follow-up? It's gonna be the Steward. So actually here, let's see. Yeah, I think I'll scatter it, even though it dies to the Rising Miasma. I want to be able to transform the Jace, so we can Miasma and have a transformed Jace here. So draw and discard. Willbreaker is nice. I think we ditch the Read the Bones here. Transform Jace, cast Rising Miasma to clear the board, plus Jace, and pause the turn. And now we have Whirler Rogue plus Willbreaker available, plus another Miasma if we need to clear the board, plus 1 in the graveyard that we can flash back with the Jace. Alright, looks like our opponent is on a token ally deck with the full amount of Converge here, making 4 allies. But we have another Miasma ready, plus 1 in the graveyard, so kind of have to choose here if we want to flash 1 back or cast 1 from hand. And I think flashing 1 back is fine here. This does mean our opponent could burn out the Jace, but this does hide the information that we have another Miasma, which I think is also pretty valuable here. So Willbreaker is not great against a token deck, but as long as our opponent plays cards like this we're fine, but Gideon could be a problem. So this is gonna start making tokens every turn, could also turn into a 5/5, which is pretty big. But we could actually steal it with Willbreaker at instant speed with the Whirler Rogue here. I think we want to plus Jace on the Blade Whirl, and then play Whirler Rogue. Could also Rising Miasma. I think our Jace is gonna die either way here. Keeping the Miasma is fine, since if our opponent makes more tokens we'll get to kill those as well. Of course, if we play the Whirler Rogue now, then our Miasma gets a little worse. So, if we sweep the board here, then Gideon will kill the Jace, which is not what we want. And we can't target the Gideon, of course. So I think we play the Whirler Rogue, and the plan is to steal creatures instead of wiping the board. So here we can plus on the Blade Whirl. and pause a turn. So if Gideon goes into a 5-5, then our Jace is gonna die, since we don't really want to lose any of our creatures here. Since next turn we'll get to have the Willbreaker. And doesn't look like our opponent is gonna have much in the way of removal for the Willbreaker. And if this plan fails, we still have a Miasma just in case. So Gideon does indeed become a creature. And we'll just let this happen. So Jace down, Calastria healer, not really a problem. So let's get our island here. And now we get to play our Willbreaker, which is gonna be pretty good, since that stops Gideon from becoming a creature. So I think I want to pause a turn here and then wait until the combat phase to steal a creature. Because if we steal one now, then Gideon can still become a creature and attack. Of course, this does mean our opponent gets to get some triggers, perhaps, although I guess we can respond to the activation and then steal one of the two rally creatures here. So Gideon does indeed become a creature. So I'm interested to see how this is all gonna work out. Since of course the Gideon will not be a creature at the end of turn anymore. But this does stop an attack from the opponent. Alright, so we get to keep the Gideon. That's sweet. And let's see here. Alright, I think we can cast the Read the Bones here. Find Read the Bones plus an island. Guess we'll just take the Read the Bones. Murk Lurker is fine on defense here. And then we can make Gideon into a creature and attack. And plan to steal another creature here at the end of turn. And combat phase, let's see. There's no real need to use the Willbreaker just yet. We can wait until the end step to steal a creature, since our opponent could still play something big in the second main phase. Alright, Forest into another Blade Whirl. So I think we want to steal the Calastria healer here. So our opponent doesn't drain us for one. And at this point it's not going to be too difficult to close out the game. Would of course like to find a counterspell to protect our Willbreaker. I think we might get to keep the Gideon even if our Willbreaker dies. But either way, let's start by casting Read the Bones. See if we find anything relevant. We could use Disperse to save our Willbreaker, but yeah, maybe we just keep it just in case. And then, let's see, we can... I think I just steal all the opponent's creatures with the Murk Lurker here, plus the Willbreaker Whirler Rogue combo, and then attack with everyone next turn. And that should be enough. Could have, of course, attacked with Gideon by plussing him. But let's just play defense here. Combat phase. Give this lifelink. Activate the Rogue. Keeping up Disperse here, just in case. Does indeed attack. So let's block. And just a land. Alright, so now I think we have lethal. Could also minus the Gideon to get an emblem, but that's not really gonna matter. Alright, so against a deck that can't kill our Willbreaker. Willbreaker is pretty good, and of course we had the Jace at the start there, which did a lot of work. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look here at our opener, which doesn't really do all that much, so I think we have to mulligan. Well. Alright, this hand could get there if our Jace survives. We also have a way to protect the Jace or Willbreaker. But if we draw black cards here without any swamps, that's not gonna be great. There we go. So hopefully we draw a black source soon rather than later. And hopefully Jace sticks around for a while. Green-black, no turn to play, so could easily be some sort of a ramp deck. Guess we'll find out. Play Jace, pass a turn. Murk Lurker, also only gonna be a 1/3 for now, without a swamp. No third land from the opponent, alright, so we might still have a chance here. Let's see what we draw. Another Read the Bones. Or no, we also have a Telling Time, alright. Think we can get rid of one of the Read the Bones here. And I think I wanna keep up Telling Time plus Scatter to the Winds. If our opponent plays something like a Nissa's Pilgrimage, I think I actually counter it since our opponent missed a land drop. Alright, we can Telling Time end of turn. Hope to find a black source, nope. Guess we'll take the 2 vials. Which at least draws into more cards. Opponent discards Desolation Twin. Let's draw and discard. Find a Disperse. Don't really need that. And play the Vial. Hope to find lands. Well, I guess we're both stuck on lands then. But at least we have a Jace, and our opponent doesn't. Alright, third land. And there's the Nissa's Pilgrimage, which I would have gladly countered. But we kind of had to play the Vial there to try and find fourth land. Another Vial. Alright, so let's see what we draw first. And if we don't find a land, which we don't, then let's see. I think we have to keep up the scatter here, otherwise we'll get acid mossed and then we just lose the game. There it is. So counter the acid moss, so we don't lose a land. And now we get to transform Jace at least. Alright, there's a land, still no black source though, so let's try and loot with the Jace once more. Find another Murk Lurker, which we don't really need. And I guess we just play 2 Vials here. Could also flashback this telling time. Yeah, we really need to find lands here, so don't hate that. And hope there's some lands on top. Alright, scatter plus island. I'll take the island and then the scatter. Pause a turn. Could have also taken the Whirler Rogue to go with the Willbreaker. But we already have a lot of Vials we can use with the Willbreaker. Plus a Jace, which can actually also target creatures with this +1. Alright, there's a second Acid Moss. So island down. So now we get to untap and keep up our scatter and pass. And try and counter whatever big creature our opponent plays, or if our opponent has another Acid Moss, we can counter that as well. Ob Nixilis we definitely don't want to see, so let's counter that. And a natural connection is fine. Opponent finds another land. Alright, so definitely need to find lands here. Alright, there's a swamp finally, so let's see here. Willbreaker doesn't do all that much with no creatures on the opponent's board there, so might maybe just want to play the Read the Bones to find more lands, so even if we get one destroyed, we still have more to play the Willbreaker, since we already have a way to target in play with the Jace. So let's play Read the Bones, and then perhaps play another Vial. Don't love the Evolving Wilds here, since we'll need our mana to come into play untapped, and Drowner's a little too expensive, so... Alright, the top 2 weren't lands unfortunately. Let's see if we find one here. Alright, we do. So even if our opponent destroys our swamp, we still have enough lands to play Willbreaker if our opponent plays a creature. Of course, if that creature is Ulamog, then our Jace will be gone. So that's a different story. Another unnatural connection. So if we want to play around Ulamog, we don't want to play our Willbreaker, because then we'll lose it. I guess we'll play our Sire of Stagnation now. Could also play double Murk Lurker, which then if our opponent plays Ulamog, we'll have still some ways left to target. Our opponent is also playing black, so could have a Languish. So maybe playing double Murk Lurker is not great. Also still have all these Vials left, so not too worried about having ways to target in play. So I think playing Sire of Stagnation is fine here, since that'll survive a Languish if our opponent has one. Plus Jace, pass a turn, and let's find out if our opponent has a big finisher here. Does have enough mana for Ulamog, alright. That's fine, so now we get to play Willbreaker, and then activate Alchemist's Vial to steal the Ulamog. Of course, if our opponent has removal for the Willbreaker, then we're in trouble. But not much we could do about that. So let's play Willbreaker. And pass the turn. And before combat we can activate the Vial. Alright, definitely want to use the Vial now. So our opponent can't sacrifice Ulamog to the leap. And hope our opponent can't kill Willbreaker. From Beyond is fine. Nice combo with the evolutionary leap since our opponent can sacrifice all the tokens. But if our opponent can't kill the Willbreaker, then I like our chances. Breaker of Armies also gets stolen by the Vial, so it's not gonna kill our Willbreaker. Alright, let's go ahead and attack with both. And mill the opponent for 20 here. Alright, so there's definitely some removal in there for the Willbreaker. So let's just hope our opponent doesn't find one of those cards. Play the Murk Lurker. Our opponent has given up there, so let's play another land and pause a turn. Leave up as many ways to target creatures as possible. And this protects us against something like a Flashback Marauder. So Breaker of Armies is fine. Bone Splinters. So Bone Splinters on Willbreaker. That's a problem. Since we couldn't steal the Breaker of Armies there. So our opponent will get the Ulamog back. So we'll have to try and kill our opponent with these Murk Lurkers, which now I wish I played the other one. Alright. Read the Bones can maybe find another Willbreaker here, which would be nice. Ob Nixilis is not really gonna help. So I guess we'll put him on the bottom here. Find a Telling Time and a land. So we can attack for 2, put the opponent at 6, play Murk Lurker, attack for 4, use a Vial, and then use another Vial to presumably win the game. Alright. Guess it doesn't hurt to Telling Time, since we'll have enough mana to use the Vial and play the Murk Lurker. Alright, there's another Willbreaker. And another land and a Whirler Rogue. So now we can play Murk Lurker, attack for 2, and use a Vial to stop the Ulamog from attacking here. And next turn we can steal the Ulamog once again. Well, I did mean to stop the Ulamog from attacking here, but it's probably not gonna end up mattering, since we can still take 10 damage here. Gatecreeper Vine. Play Willbreaker. So we did lose the Whirler Rogue that was on top of our library there. Play Sunken Hollow. Give this lifelink. Opponent sacrifices it. to find a Pilgrim's Eye. Attack for 4. And now we want to use the Willbreaker. An Acid Moss is fine. Steal Ulamog. And our opponent sacrifices it. Alright. Oblivion Sower. So we can just steal whatever creature our opponent plays and attack for lethal. All those lands that got exiled by Ulamog. And now at the end step, Pilgrim's Eye is fine. Interesting. Alright. We can give this lifelink, get sacrificed to the leap, and now we can steal this and attack for lethal. Alright, sweet. Was pretty close there in the end. Our opponent did find removal for our first Willbreaker, but we did find a second one. Alright, sweet. Let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is not great. We have no early plays. Rogue and Miasma isn't really a combo. I think we can do better. Alright, at least we have a lot of card draw and card selection here. Of course, now we're up against a mono red deck, so that's gonna punish us for having all these cards that don't really affect the board. So it's gonna be a quick and painful death here. Let's go ahead and play the Evolving Wilds. We could use this in combination with Telling Time to shuffle, but I don't think we'll have time for that. So let's get a swamp, pause a turn. And this Read the Bones or this Telling Time is gonna have to find a Rising Miasma, which I think is the only way we can try and stabilize here. Our opponent puts an enchantment on here, alright. If it was a Call of the Full Moon, then the Glory Chaser is gonna survive a Rising Miasma. But instead it's an Inferno Fist, which only pumps the creature's power. So Miasma is still good to go here. So let's play out our island, alright. Disperse is actually nice. I think we can just use the Disperse here. This is gonna buy us a lot of time. Our opponent has no creatures left on the board, loses the Inferno Fist. So that was a good draw. And that's a good way to punish decks that run all those enchantments. Replays the Glory Chaser, which is now just a 1/1, and Perilous Mirror. Alright, so Miasma would still be a good draw here. And now we have to decide if we want to Read the Bones or Telling Time. Read the Bones shows us more cards, but it does cost 2 life. But yeah, I think it's still worth it here. So let's go for it. Murk Lurker is also good, so I'll take that. And we find another swamp. Alright, so that can definitely help us stabilize. The Glory Chaser will get renowned, but we can also always try and kill it with Ob Nixilis later. Another Inferno Fist. So we're gonna take 4, and their opponent has essentially 4 more damage with Inferno Fist and Perilous Mirror if it dies. So we are taking some damage here. But if we top deck a Rising Miasma, we're in a great spot. It's not a Miasma. Alright, let's see. We can Alchemist's Vial to prevent the Glory Chaser from attacking, and then next turn use Ob Nixilis to kill it. Our other option is playing Murk Lurker, but that can't block the Glory Chaser, so it's not really gonna do all that much. So I kind of like playing the Vial here. And pause a turn. Thopter Engineer is gonna make a 1/1 hasty Thopter. Use a Vial on the Glory Chaser. So our opponent can still attack us for 2 here. And anything else? Nope. Another Read the Bones that we can't really cast here. So I think we have to play Ob Nixilis and kill the Glory Chaser. Opponent can sacrifice the Inferno Fist to deal 2 damage, which can either kill Ob Nixilis or go to our face. And if our opponent has a Exquisite Firecraft, we are dead, since 3 + 4 is 7. Molten Vortex, interesting. So does our opponent have lands left in hand? Does not attack Ob Nixilis, so I guess we're dead. Not a great card, but Molten Vortex has its moments. So that's 1 land. And a 2nd land. So your opponent did have a lot of lands for being an aggro deck here. If we had more time we could have played the Murk Lurker to try and gain some life back. But yeah, let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look here at our opener, which looks great. Turn 2 Vial, turn 3 either Murk Lurker or keep up Scatter. And then Sire of Stagnation for the late game. And we have ways to target creatures if we draw a Willbreaker. Another Vial. And let's see what we're up against here. Turn 1 Plains. Turn 2 Chapel. And Felder Cub. Alright. So again, destroy enchantments, we don't really care about that. Let's play the Vial. Which finds an island. So probably gonna play the Murk Lurker next turn. Alright, island as well, so 3 colors. Could be some sort of control deck even. Just playing Felder Cub as enchantment removal. Passes a turn, so yeah, could definitely be some sort of control deck. So do we want to play out the Murk Lurker and get it countered? Or do we just play a Vial? Opponent could also play a Gideon next turn, so we maybe want to keep up our own Scatter to the Winds. Problem is, we don't have any ways to do anything if we don't scatter, so we don't have any telling times we can play at instant speed. But I think we can just pass here. We're not really in a hurry against just a 2-2. And if we can avoid losing to Gideon, that's nice. So it's gonna attack us for 2. No attacks, interesting. Plays an Archangel. Well, that's worthy of a counterspell, since we don't have a great way to answer it. Don't really get the no attack, maybe our opponent playing around some instant speed creature that I don't know about. Alright, so we could play the other Vial here, but I don't hate playing the Murk Lurker and passing the turn. So now we have a way to block the Felidar Cub, and hopefully these two Eldrazi are good enough to close out the game. Alright. Foundry of the Consuls. And there's Gideon. Alright. A turn too late. I'm pretty surprised our opponent got to cast this on turn 4, when he's also playing Foundry of the Consuls as a colorless land, together with a triple white card, but oh well. Alright, so we can attack Gideon, make a creature not being able to block, but I think I would rather keep the Vial to prevent Gideon from attacking as a 5/5. So let's just play the Vial, keep up black mana. Telling time, alright. Pass the turn, and then next turn we get to play one of our 6-drops. Keep up telling time, Vial plus the lifelink as well. 6th land for the opponent. Gideon does indeed become a creature, so I'm more than happy to use a Vial here. So it doesn't attack. No attacks from the opponent, so we can telling time end of turn. Find a lot of land. So I think, let's see, our opponent can easily have a counterspell up here. I think we lead with the Drowner, since I think the Sire of Stagnation is gonna be better. Alright, Drowner does resolve. Can still use the Vial with our Scion tokens here. And not really interested in attacking. Opponent can make 2 Thopters, nope. Instead it's a Reprisal to kill the Drowner, alright. That's fine. So if Gideon becomes a creature once again, nope, instead he goes for the ultimate. So these are 3/3s now. And do we see an attack? We don't. So our opponent can use this at instant speed to make enough blockers so we can't kill the Gideon. Drowner of Hope is interesting, since now we actually can tap down these so we can kill the Gideon. Alright, let's go for it. Play a land first. And does our opponent have a response? It's gonna make 2 Thopter tokens. So we're throwing away 4 Scion tokens just to kill the Gideon. But I think it's still worth it. We could actually save one of the Scion tokens by activating the Vial. So yeah, let's go for it. That can't block. And then tap down, sacrificing the Scion token. And then we'll have to find a way to stop those Thopter tokens. So Gideon down, and we'll pause the turn. I guess we could have also done it differently, so we could have kept our Murk Lurker on defense here. I'm not quite sure. But our opponent's not gonna attack with the 3/3s on the ground, so we get hit for 4 in the air. This Shambling Vents is also gonna be relevant. So drawing Willbreaker, of course, would be great. Alright. So we can tap down the ally token and then give this a lifelink. So we gain 5 life. That's a way to beat the 4 power in the air here. Because if we just attack with the Drowner, our opponent can double block, which is not great for us. Yeah, let's go for it. And then we should still be able to cast our Sire of Stagnation. So use the Drowner to tap down the Father Cup, sacrificing the Scion token. And even if our opponent bounces our Drowner here, we still get to replay it and get the Scions back. So give it lifelink. And then we can play out our Sire, which could get countered here, but does not. Alright. So we're back to 19. We have 2 giant creatures in play. Aha, retreat to Emeria. But at least we have the Sire of Stagnation, which kind of fights the landfall here. Since now if our opponent plays a land, we get to draw 2 cards. But we are gonna take some damage. Decides to make a token instead of pumping the flyers there. Alright. I don't hate our spot right now. Next turn we can play Alhammarret, which can stop the flyers. If we ever find our Willbreaker, of course, we're in great shape. I think we start by taking a look at what our opponent is doing over there. Just a land, alright. So we could attack with, let's see. Yeah, our opponent can kill our Sire of Stagnation by triple blocking. If we attack with the Drowner, our opponent can just double block with these, which isn't great for us. So I think we just pass the turn and stay on defense for now. And then we can start attacking with the Alhammarret and give it lifelink. So our opponent has Swamp plus an unknown card. and I don't mind if our opponent plays a land, since we'll get to draw 2 cards again. Valor and Akros, alright, so our opponent is some sort of Asper tokens deck. I think we've figured that out by now. So whenever a creature enters the battlefield, creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn, which goes nicely with the retreat, since now we can make a token and give all our creatures +1/+1. But I still don't think that's good enough. So opponent no cards left in hand, can't really attack. Can also give our creatures lifelink here, so just passes a turn. Still more lands. Think we can start thinning a bit with this Evolving Wilds. Attack for 5 in the air. Give it lifelink. And then play Murk Lurker and keep up Unholy Hunger. Or I guess we can't keep up Unholy Hunger then. So it's probably better just to pass the turn then. At some point we can also consider attacking with these, maybe make our opponent triple block and then use the Unholy Hunger to blow out the opponent. Drana's Emissary, pumping the team, but I don't think we're gonna see an attack yet. Alright, just the flyers, which is fine. And I think we can Unholy Hunger the Emissary here. Because with our opponent at 10, I don't really want our opponent gaining any life, since that's gonna be a 2-turn clock for Alhammarret. Alright, there's a Willbreaker, so that's gonna get the party started. Play land. Attack for 5. And I don't think we even give it a lifelink here, since I would rather be able to activate the Murk Lurker once more. So pause the turn, wait until the combat step, and then steal as many creatures as possible. And hope our opponent can't kill the Willbreaker. Council's Lieutenant. So let's let the trigger happen first, so we steal larger creatures here. So Valor and Akros triggers. And before our opponent gets to attack, we will steal some creatures here. Alright, let's steal those Thopter tokens. And I guess we can also steal the Felidar Cub, which can then destroy one of the enchantments. And on our next turn we can attack with the Thopter tokens for the win. Interesting attack. Alright. Untap and go to combat. Alright, sweet. I wanna thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day.